As you may have seen, I still can't believe I'm going to say this, but Boris Johnson is our new Prime Minister. Boris Johnson. Apparently, from what we can tell, looking at what he's doing, since becoming new Prime Minister, he is barreling the United Kingdom towards a Brexit and an inevitable election. This is what it seems to be. So, the title of this video is going to be, is he barreling towards what they're calling a no-deal Brexit, or barreling towards us, or leading us to nose plant into a no-deal Brexit, or running head first catastrophically into a no-deal Brexit? This is how they're framing it. Are we going to get that and the inevitable election? Because a lot of people are speculating, me included, that an election is now inevitable within the next few months. He's losing his majority in government. Now, let me explain what that means, because there's basically 650 seats up for grabs in the House of Commons. 650 seats. And you need 50% of those seats to form a majority government. If you get 50% of the seats, you can form a government on your own with nobody else's help. However, if you get less than 50%, you still might, and you're the biggest party, you still might be able to form a government that has a working arrangement like the Tory government have right now with the DUP, and the DUP's extra 9 or 10 seats, whatever it is, and that takes you over the 325 threshold that you need to get 50%. Now, it's not quite 325 needed, because Sinn Féin don't take their seats, and the Speaker of the House, he doesn't vote in anything, and I think there's 2 Labour under speakers that don't vote either. So it's about 320 seats you need for a working majority. And now, as a result of what happened just last week, that majority is down to just 1. It was thin to begin with the DUP's bribe that they got, that gave the Tories their minority government. That's what a minority, difference between a minority government and majority government is. But as you can see, there was a Brecon and Radnorshire by-election last week, and Boris Johnson, it says, left with a majority of just 1 after the Tories have lost to the Lib Dems. Now, just need to go into this because it's important when you consider that we're probably going to be facing election in the next few months. And remember, that election is probably going to be about Brexit if it's before Brexit. The speculation that it's going to be just after, I'll cover that in a bit. But I just want to give you an idea of what the sort of thing, election colluding, if you like, you can look out for in any upcoming election if it is pre-Brexit, because it says at the bottom of this Evening Standard article, the vote may also be seen as an early victory for the Remain alliance because the Lib Dems won this by-election. The by-election was called as a result of an expenses scandal, as it would seem, because I think 10% of the electorate got together and said, basically, we want this guy, we want to run a by-election, call a by-election, because this guy's a crook. Because he forged, by the look of it, £700 worth of receipts for pictures within his office and then claimed it on expenses. Really, it's not exactly, duck pond-esque that we saw in the expenses scandal 10 years ago, but nevertheless, he faced a by-election, and the Lib Dems got together with Plaid Cymru and the Greens, who both decided they weren't going to field a candidate for this by-election, and they were going to throw their weight behind the Remain candidate that they had on the ticket, which was the Lib Dems. So the Greens, Plaid Cymru and the Lib Dems basically all got together and said, we're going to beat the Conservatives, and as you can see, it worked. Now, whether they would have needed that or not, don't know, but as you can see, Plaid Cymru and the Greens agreeing not to field candidates in order not to split the pro-EU vote. Yeah, if we're going to have an election before we get a Brexit, you can bet your bottom dollar that sort of thing is going to happen more and more often. That's if we get one pre-Brexit. And as you're about to find out, we might not, because Boris Johnson could lose his majority even without another by-election. Because, of course, somebody could quit the Tories or somebody could move over to the Tories. And there's talk that may happen because Philip Lee here, MP Philip Lee, I think it is, he says, at the moment I'm increasingly feeling politically homeless. That's because he's a pro-EU Conservative. So he's saying I might leave and defect to the Lib Dems, and all of a sudden then Conservatives haven't got their working government. They can't demonstrate that they've got a working government, or certainly it's on a knife edge, one more, and then, who knows what can happen. I think he will try and form another government, and there's nothing to say that he won't somehow get the Lib Dems on board again. Now Jo Swinson is leader, as I proved in my video, she's basically a Tory, just a horrible voting record. And if no government could be formed, there's talk that Corbyn could, with an alliance of about 7 parties. That's unlikely. Most possibly, though, we're going to get another election. So it's almost inevitable now as to us getting one. It's not a case of, I think, are we going to get an election? It's sort of, when is the election going to be? Especially when you factor in, there have been reports in the last week that Boris Johnson and the Tories are spending a small fortune on Facebook ads in what's known as split testing. Now, I know from my time as an internet marketer that split testing is something that you do to try and find out what the best ads and the best way of framing an argument and the thing that gets the best click-through rate and return on investment, etc. And that's what they've been doing on Facebook now. And also, on top of that, the Tories have been on a bit of a Tory promising spending spree. The spending spree, they're calling it. They're just promising that they're going to spend money. Now, I went to my neighbour the other day to see her for a while, and she knows I know a bit about politics, and she turned to me, I swear, these were her words, and she said, Gordon, can you answer me one question? Where have the Conservatives found all this bloody money from? She said. And she's right, because of the amount of money that the Tories are throwing around at the moment to prepare for a no-deal Brexit, honestly, is astronomical. It started with this, okay? This is from The Independent. Now, this is all in the space of just a couple of weeks. I mean, Boris Johnson hasn't been Prime Minister for that long. Sajid Javid to go on $1 billion no-deal spending spree with $100 million for the advertising blitz. So that's $100 million on Brexit advertising alone. And an extra $1 billion earmarked for no-deal preparations. As you can see, the article says the Chancellor, this is about Sajid Javid, is due to announce the money this week, which will be in addition to the existing $4.2 billion earmarked by his predecessor, Philip Hammond. Excuse me. So, there's already $4.2 billion earmarked, and this billion is an extra billion. So that's $5.2 billion now. And $100 million of that is for advertising, okay? So it's $5.2 billion now. But then they increased it from $1 billion to $2.1 billion. So now it's $6.3 billion, as I understand it, that they have earmarked now for no-deal Brexit preparations. But that doesn't say it all. Because there's also this in The Guardian, Boris Johnson exists at a $1.8 billion now pledged for the NHS hospitals. And I think that's over and above what has already been pledged that I've just shown you. I think that is. I couldn't see anywhere where it's like allocated in it. So that means the Tories have pledged an extra £8.1 billion of the public money for no-deal Brexit preparations because they've buggered it all up for the last few years. 8.1 billion. That's without the amount of money that because he's saying he's backing HS3, this Leeds to Manchester railway or whatever it is, that he's got no intention at all of backing. I assume he's backing HS3 because HS2 was such a resounding success and, came in on time and on budget. So it's 8.1 billion plus HS3, whatever that's going to cost, plus whatever he promised Nicola Sturgeon, plus, God knows how much he's had to promise the DUP. Where'd you find all this money from, Boris? My neighbour, she's right to ask. Where have you found all this money from? Because you've been crushing people like my neighbour for 10 years, saying you've got no money. Why? Because the bankers pissed it all up the wall. As I explained to her, the monetary system is basically a Ponzi scheme run by the mafia. That's basically what I said. They had the money all along. They had it all along. They have a printing press. They can spend it on whatever they want. They're just doing it a different way so they can get to keep all the bloody money, seemingly. They don't want to give it to people like my neighbour. That's what I said to her. All of this that I'm explaining to you points to an election being called later this year. The theory being that it's probably going to be an autumn, sometime in November. Now, this is where it gets a little bit murky because I'm not 100% of the rules at the moment with regards to this. I have been researching it, and to be honest, they sort of make the rules up as they go along at the moment, don't they, in Westminster? I mean, let's face it, you remember when the Tories were found in contempt of court and there was word that the guy was going to be locked up in the Tower of London because it never happened before? What happened? What happened? Contempt of Parliament. Did anything happen? Surely contempt of Parliament should have some sort of, punishment. Like I said, they seem to make the rules up at the moment. But if they call an election and Boris Johnson calls it for, say, I don't know, middle or the end of September, like I say, I don't know the rules, but 6 weeks before an election, there's no government. This Parliament gets disbanded, doesn't it? So essentially, there won't be a Parliament around on October the 31st, when we, as they say, as I heard it from a Guardian reporter the other day, nose plant out of the EU. I'd love to fearmonger it, they really do. But Boris, apparently, is barrelling towards this no-deal Brexit and this nose plant Brexit. I don't know how he's going to do it, but he's promising he's going to do it. Now, I've got to clear something up here because we've been told for the last couple of years, in fact, for over a year now, I've been telling you they don't want to give you Brexit. And they don't want to give you Brexit. They don't. Nothing has changed my mind with regards to that. And the reason that they don't want to give you Brexit is because Brexit, I and many other people think, may be the existential crisis that leads to the breakup of the United Kingdom because of the Northern Ireland issue. And then if Northern Ireland becomes unified with Ireland or becomes a separate country or whatever, then Scotland, who voted 63% to stop in the EU, they're going to want to break up. And you can see Wales will then get involved. The breakup of the United Kingdom is a very real possibility. Theresa May, and this is not me being bellicose, by the way. This is not being hyperbolic. Theresa May said it in one of her speeches. In that room with the wooden cabinets behind her, that's some special meaning that she was saying. In that speech she said, I will not break up my country. She said it. I will not go back, reenact the will of the people, and I will not break up my country. That's what they believe. Brexit will lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom. Boris obviously doesn't think so. The excuse that they have used, that Brexit cannot happen, of course, is because of the border and the backstop and the Good Friday Agreement. Which was, I think it was a good reason. Certainly a good reason that they used anyway. I've been thinking about that after something that came to light last week, and let me tell you about it in a second. Boris went over to Ireland, didn't he? And visited Arlene Foster of the DUP, and somehow the DUP are not pulling their support right now of Boris. When really, when you look at everything that they've said over the last 2 years, they bloody should do. So you do wonder, like I say, how much has Boris, promised to bung them this time? Over $1 billion last time, wasn't it? How much this time? You do have to ask these questions. Why aren't the DUP all of a sudden pulling support? It's going for a no-deal Brexit by the look of it. They don't want that, do they? Now all of a sudden they're quiet. Boris is saying balls to the backstop, remember. And he's increased spending massively on what the establishment framers crashing out of the European Union on a no-deal Brexit. So you'd think that the DUP are pissed off with him. But here's the thing. I heard somebody say it last week, I forget who it was, but they said to me, what's going to happen if we leave the EU at the border in Northern Ireland? If we leave the EU on a no-deal Brexit, what's going to happen? What's going to change? And I started thinking about it. Well, we're not going to put up a border. We're not going to do it. Do you think Ireland want to put up a border? What happens? Honestly, what happens if Boris literally went over there and just said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to barrel towards a no-deal Brexit, and we're going to basically say to the EU, up yours, if you don't want to open the agreement and say there must be a backstop tying us into the EU until 2099, bugger you, we're going to leave on WTO rules, which is the legally binding sort of default position if no deal is reached by then. There's nothing in that agreement to say, oh, but you only leave if the agreement between Northern Ireland and then the backstop and then there's nothing in that to say, no. There's nothing to say in it, oh, well, you can't leave if the backstop thing isn't sorted out, you see what I mean? What happens if Boris just says, now we're leaving, sod it? What, of Ireland, are the EU once again to erect a border in Northern Ireland? What changes? How will people's lives in that area change? I started thinking about it, and already I know from experience from people I've spoken to who've said to me that everybody buys a car in, I can't remember whether it was the North or I think it was in the EU. Everybody buys a car in the EU and goes, something like that. And cigarettes, they're all different prices over there. Seriously, how much trade actually goes through that border? Is it a massive amount? Is the world going to end? Will the skies fall? Will the mountains crumble? Will the seas roar if we don't sort out? Seriously, I'm asking the question, what happens? I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Do you? Boris Johnson certainly doesn't think so. So it does make you wonder, you know, the reason that they've been giving you all along that you can't have Brexit, was it a reason at all? It's certainly something that if we do leap out of the EU in a no-deal Brexit, as they keep saying and fear-mongering it, if it does happen, then you will have to say, well, what was that balls for the last 2 years? But we know what that was. It was just them trying to kick the can down the road. So, with all this happening right now, with the Brexit thing happening, and with, you know, the possible election coming up, the next few months are going to be really interesting. Because if this happens, and we do get a Brexit, and we do get a general election as well, and that maybe general election comes after we've had Brexit, there'll be no need for the Brexit to stand, and Brexit Party and Nigel Farage to actually stand at that election. Will there? Think about it. It's going to be interesting. And there's no doubt about this. I can say this, whatever happens, I can foresee this. Politics in this country is going to become even more of a pantomime than it already is. Because think about it. We've got the ex-host of satirical comedy news show Have I Got News For You as our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. And in America, you've got the ex-host of Celebrity Apprentice, Donald You're Fired Trump, as President of the United States. These men, at the moment, these two men, not forget, we are told by the media in both countries are hated by the people. Remember, they are hated by the people apparently. The thing is, and here's the thing, and here's what I am excited about looking forward actually, is they are also hated by the neoliberal establishment. I don't know whether the people do hate them. They just say that, to be honest. Trump support seems to be pretty solid to me over the years. I haven't seen any real figures on Boris Johnson because I don't trust the polls, because the polls have been wrong for so often. But there's one thing for sure, even if the people don't hate them, the neoliberal establishment really do, on both sides of the Atlantic. Both sides. I don't think, you'll be hard-pressed to find somebody who would disagree with that. The neoliberal establishment do not like Trump, and they do not like Boris Johnson. They can't control them. And right now, Donald Trump, especially after the Mueller fiasco that happened the other day that I covered, Donald Trump is seemingly on a mission to go after the people who started that ridiculous witch hunt of a Russiagate investigation. Phony Russiagate investigation. The establishment lie, as I called it, that could very well have all started with the entrapment of a Trump campaign advisor, George Papadopoulos. I'll tell you that actually while I'm here. See, Trump admits he has allowed Devin Nunes access to classified intelligence documents about the Russia investigation. Devin Nunes is the man who's been going after and asking lots of questions about Joseph Mifsud, as I reported the other day. Could very well all come crashing down. There's no doubt that Boris Johnson is going to be a big friend of Donald Trump in the next few months. Because the UK establishment, in this investigation, are seemingly up to their neck in it all. With MI6 spies. And, sorry about that. With their MI6 spies. And this mysterious guy, Joseph Mifsud. All with links to MI6 and intelligence. All right at the very centre of how this ridiculous witch hunt of a Russiagate investigation started in the very beginning. So did it all start in the UK? Is Boris and Donald, have they got a plan to bring it all down and make them popular? There's one thing for sure. No proof. There was no proof of any Russian collusion during the 2016 election, and there's no proof that any Russians affected any votes in that 2016 election, and no proof that Russia, nothing was ever uncovered. But there was lots of evidence that one company was heavily involved in the election, heavily, and may very well have changed thousands of votes. It was Cambridge Analytica, remind me. Which country were Cambridge Analytica based in? The ruling elite of this country, the establishment, if you like, in this country and America, will no doubt be horrified at the thought of a no-deal Brexit in this country. Boris Johnson, the UK especially, they'll be horrified of the thought of a post-no-deal Brexit Boris Johnson government. They'll be horrified about it. But what's even more interesting to me is, however scared they are at that thought, and however scared they are that they'll have Boris and they'll have to deal with Boris and all his Borisness, they know that however scary it is having to deal with him, it's far more scary the prospect of a Jeremy Corbyn-led government instead of a Boris Johnson one. So they'll be given a choice between a rock and a hard place, the establishment will, as to which one they're going to pick. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with regards to this. I'm loving watching it and loving getting interesting in trying to decipher this madness. I really want to thank you so much for supporting me in doing it, because you're giving me a front row seat to this absolute circus. It's a circus. It really is. We've got game show hosts as two of the most powerful men in the world. Thanks for supporting me. You're giving me a front row seat to this madness. No honour.